The first thing I saw was red and blue light crawling across my barn like a brush fire at sunset. 2 county patrol cars rolled slow over my gravel, tires crunching loud enough to wake the horses. Dust hung in the air, glowing in the strobes. My gate was open. I hadn't opened it. Karen stood just inside the fence line, pressed slacks, clipboard tucked against her chest like a trophy. She wasn't smiling exactly. It was worse than that. She looked certain. Her brother stepped out of the lead cruiser in full uniform, Lieutenant Bars catching the light. Calm, official, practiced. "Sir," he said, unfolding paperwork, "this property is being placed under emergency nuisance abatement. Unauthorized agricultural structures, zoning violations, immediate compliance required, seized." That word just floated there between us. I took the documents. The paper smelled fresh, like it had been printed minutes ago. My barn creaked behind me in the evening wind. I read slowly. Then I looked up at him and said, "Lieutenant, you might want to read page 3 more carefully." The cruisers kept idling in my driveway. And that's when this really started. I bought those 12 acres 10 years ago, before the subdivision crept this far out, back when the nights were still dark and you could hear coyotes instead of leaf blowers. Before I retired, I spent 2 decades as a federal land compliance investigator. Environmental misuse, easement disputes, a few ugly cases involving civil rights and property seizures. I learned how paperwork can be weaponized and how it can be dismantled. When my wife passed, I needed space, so I restored the old barn board by board, hung an American flag by the fence line, put up cross-fencing for 2 horses. Nothing fancy, just honest land used honestly. I pay my dues, I wave when people drive by, I fix my own fence posts. The HOA wasn't here when I moved in. Annexation pulled us into their boundary 5 years later. I didn't fight it. Figured I'd keep my head down and live quiet. I believe in 3 things: property rights, due process, and not escalating unless you have to. But I started noticing something early. Other barns, same height, same siding, no citations, mine. Different story, peace is fine, until someone decides your independence offends them. That's about when Karen arrived. Karen moved in from somewhere with sidewalks and opinions about grass height. Within 6 months, she was HOA president. At meetings, she used phrases like raising property values and modernizing aesthetics, like we were a condo complex instead of a rural stretch of Texas that smelled like hay after rain. She didn't like visible livestock from the road, didn't like weathered wood, didn't like fencing that looked agricultural, which was interesting, considering we lived in an agricultural zone. She carried a clipboard the way some people carry a sidearm. Always notes, always citations, always a reminder that we have friends in the county. Her brother came up often. County police lieutenant. If things escalate, she'd say lightly, "We have resources." I stayed quiet. Legacy land doesn't need applause. Then she introduced a bylaw amendment, redefining certain agricultural structures as commercial facilities. Said it clarified community standards. It passed fast. Too fast. I've sat through enough regulatory votes to know when numbers don't add up. The required threshold was higher than what showed up in the minutes. So how did it pass? I didn't challenge it. Not yet. Then the first citation hit my mailbox, and I knew it wasn't random. The first citation said my barn siding was non-compliant in tone and finish. It was restored cedar. The second claimed unauthorized livestock visibility from roadway. I've got 2 horses. They exist. They move. That's kind of the point. The third notice came certified mail. Daily fines. $250 per day until remedied. That's when paper cuts started drawing blood. I didn't argue. I documented. Photographs, dates, copies of every envelope. I sent certified letters requesting enforcement parity records, how many similar barns cited, how many livestock complaints filed across the association. No response. At the next board meeting, Karen cleared her throat and suggested I might be operating an unlicensed agricultural business. The word business hung there, oily and deliberate. Neighbors shifted in their seats. A week later, another certified letter, intent to place lien on property. Now that got my attention. HOAs can file liens, but only if notice procedures are precise. Timelines matter. Quorum votes matter. If the process is flawed, the lien collapses. I pulled the meeting minutes. Timestamps didn't match. The amendment vote count didn't meet threshold. Someone had either miscounted or rushed it through. I stayed calm, because when paperwork gets sloppy, it means someone thinks you won't read it. Karen must have realized I was reading, and that's when she stopped relying on mail. She didn't send the next message by mail. She brought it in person. Karen pulled up one afternoon with her brother's cruiser right behind her, parked where anyone driving past could see it. Optics. That's what this was. The lieutenant stepped out, polite but firm. "We're looking at potential zoning enforcement coordination," he said. "Non-compliance can trigger county-level action." County-level action. It was phrased like information. It landed like a threat. 3 days later, I received a county inspection notice, filed and scheduled faster than anything I'd seen in years. Most complaints sit in intake for weeks. This one moved like it had an escort. I checked the routing stamp. Origin, direct administrative referral. That wasn't standard. Complaints usually pass through intake review before escalation. So how did this one skip the line? Then came the declaration, emergency nuisance, allegations that my livestock conditions posed a hazard. 2 healthy horses on 12 clean acres, and that's what led to the cruisers in my driveway. The paperwork in my hands. What neither of them realized was the code they cited, applied to suburban overlay districts, not grandfathered agricultural parcels like mine. I didn't argue that at the gate. I just nodded. Then I turned and walked back inside the house. The email went out that night. Property under investigation for safety violations. No name, but everyone knew. After that, eye contact got scarce. At the feed store, conversation stopped half a beat too soon. One of the guys behind the counter asked, careful like, if everything was okay out there. Said he'd heard something about contamination. Contamination, Karen framed it as community safety, protecting property values, protecting families. It's amazing how fast a narrative spreads when it's wrapped in concern. I didn't defend myself publicly. I requested records, HOA meeting minutes. Full vote counts on the amendment. County complaint routing logs tied to my parcel number. When the documents came in, the pattern sharpened. The amendment hadn't reached the required supermajority. The expedited nuisance review carried the lieutenant's electronic sign-off. And the internal timestamps didn't line up with the official meeting adjournment. Then I saw it, an email thread attachment labeled, confidential, delete after review. I hadn't opened it yet when the cruisers rolled up for seizure. As Karen's brother stepped toward my barn, hand resting near his belt, I realized something. They thought isolation would make me fold. Instead, it clarified my next move. When I stepped back outside, one deputy was already photographing my horses. "Go ahead and document everything," the lieutenant said. I walked toward them slowly, a small leather wallet in my hand, the same one I'd carried for 20 years. I flipped it open. Retired Federal Land Compliance Division. I don't lead with it. Never needed to. I'm still federally deputized as a consultant for jurisdictional reviews, I said evenly, and this parcel is federally grandfathered agricultural land. It predates your suburban overlay by decades. The deputy lowered his camera. Delective enforcement tied to protected land use can trigger federal civil rights review. I continued, and using police authority to advance a private HOA action can raise deprivation issues under color of law. Silence settled in heavy. I looked at the lieutenant. A federal complaint package was filed 48 hours ago. Documentation attached, including your expedited routing signature. Karen shifted behind him, and that email thread marked confidential, delayed after review. I said, already forwarded to the state inspector general. The dust kept drifting across the driveway. The power dynamic changed without anyone raising their voice. But I knew something important. Badges don't end corruption, sunlight does. They called it an emergency session. Word spread fast. The clubhouse was packed, folding chairs scraping tile, low murmurs, that stale coffee smell hanging in the air. Karen sat at the front table, posture tight, folder stacked high. I waited until the floor opened. Then I walked through it slowly. First, the amendment vote count. Required supermajority. Unmet. I read the numbers straight from their own minutes. Second, the email. Printed. Highlighted. Karen requesting her brother to fast-track nuisance status before he digs in. A few heads turned toward the lieutenant in the back. Third, photographs of 3 other barns, same siding, same visibility from the road. 0 citations. The county oversight representative sat quietly along the wall, hands folded. Karen leaned forward. "We were protecting property values," she said, voice sharpening. "Community standards matter." "Process matters more," I replied. Calm, timeline clear, dates aligned, statute references brief and precise. The county rep finally spoke. An internal review had been opened regarding misuse of police resources connected to a private enforcement action. The room shifted. Murmurs grew louder. Confidence drained from the front table. Her brother didn't say a word. And that's when accountability stopped being theoretical. But consequences don't arrive all at once. They move step by step. The county statement came 2 weeks later. Tenal Affairs Review opened. Misuse of departmental resources under evaluation. It wasn't loud. Just a short press release posted online. The HOA's attorney followed with another notice. The agricultural amendment was void due to procedural defects. The lien attempt against my property, nullified. Karen resigned before the next scheduled meeting. Personal reasons, the email said. Her brother was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. No handcuffs, no headlines. Just the slow, deliberate unwind of authority that had overreached. A few neighbors stopped by the fence after that. Awkward apologies. Said they should have asked questions sooner. I told them it was fine, because this was never about winning. It was about making sure process meant something again. And once the noise settled, the ranch felt quiet in a different way. Not fragile resurrected. I repainted the barn myself that fall. Same cedar tone, same texture. I left the horses visible from the road on purpose. I started attending HOA meetings again, not to control anything, just to make sure sunlight stayed in the room. New bylaw protections passed that winter. Clear vote thresholds, conflict of interest disclosures, limits on enforcement authority. Nothing flashy, just guardrails. I've learned something through all this. Power doesn't corrupt neighborhoods, silence does. So let me ask you, if an HOA tried to weaponize local officials against you, would you fight quietly like I did, or go public immediately? Next time, I'll tell you about the developer who tried to reroute a public easement through my fence line. If this story hit home for you, do me a favor. Hit that like button so more homeowners see this before they're the next target. Secord if you believe property rights still matter in this country. Every week we break down real stories of HOA overreach, backroom deals, and the people who pushed back the right way, and I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had an HOA try to intimidate you with fines, liens, or local officials? What would you have done in my position? Your stories matter. A lot of people reading them won't feel so alone. And trust me, the next one about that developer and the easement line, you're not going to want to miss it.